The rollout and ultimate lack of transparency surrounding the Epstein files has sparked a significant splinter in the conservative movement, with a lot of conservatives, especially younger voters, turning against President Trump on this issue. But in a surprising reversal, the president appears to be changing course. He's now calling for the total release of the Epstein files. On Truth Social, he wrote, "House Republicans should vote to release the Epstein files because we have nothing to hide. It's time to move on from this Democrat hoax perpetrated by radical left lunatics in order to deflect from the great success of the Republican Party." This also comes after Trump rescinded his support for Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, a once stalwart supporter, over her calls for transparency regarding Epstein. Now, here to talk about all of this with me is CBN's Billy Hallowell. Billy, I know there's a lot there, but what do you make of this strategy shift from the White House?
I mean, I think when you see something not playing well with the public, not playing well within your own political party, at some point you have to shift. And I think this is a necessary shift probably that they're making, realizing that this is hurting. Look, regardless of what people think about what is actually in the files or what has happened, the dismissive sort of nature of this has only fueled more questions and created debate and created problems. People want answers to this. And I think there was a misread on the part of maybe the president and others around him surrounding how much people actually cared about this. You know, who knows what's actually going on? It may very well be that it was sort of like, this is a distraction. Why are we wasting time on this? Let's move on. Well, people clearly have not been willing to move on from this. And so I think they're reacting to that now.
Well, and one of Trump's arguments all along has been if there was more damaging information about him in the Epstein files, the Democrats would have found it and released it well ahead of last year's presidential election. So what do you make of that specific argument from the Trump campaign and now the Trump administration?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You know, you have to put this in the backdrop of all of the other things that have happened with Russia and, you know, all these other issues in the past where Trump and the Democrats have really locked in on a battle that has become very public, that honestly has become very political. And so I feel like this decision is being made, you know, this switch is being made in light of what has already happened. I do think it's an interesting argument. You know, if there was something, now look, who knows what's in those files, but if there was something more damaging, would it not have been leaked at this point to hurt him? I think, again, it's interesting. We'll have to see what happens. But for him to now fully go in on wanting this release, you would have to assume he must not be worried about what's in it if he's saying, hey, go ahead and release it. But I don't know. This is such a bizarre story that just won't end.
Yeah, it for sure is a weird story. And another thing that I want to bring into this conversation, because I know it's so important and it's kind of looming large, this is something that you've talked about, I've talked about, and CBN's Raj Nair has also talked about, which is this growing anti-Semitism that's on the conservative side, which is something we haven't dealt with to this extent in modern history until now. So how do you think that factors in? Because it seems like right now there is this desire for the president, the White House, to get some solid footing with the base because there is so much uncertainty. There is splintering on the Epstein files, but there's also splintering on a whole host of other issues, one of the major ones being Israel. So how do you think that factors into this debate?
Yeah, I think that's really that's another backdrop that every decision is being made against, right? You have battles from Candace Owens to Tucker Carlson down the line to Israel, which those, you know, obviously intersect with those two individuals and many others. There's a lot going on. And this is a political climate where both parties, it feels like, are dealing with totally different forces pulling at them, right? The Democrats have AOC, Mamdani, they have all these other people that are sort of
their own version. Sorry to interrupt you, but they're their own versions of anti-Semitism that they're dealing with on their side too. So this is not a one-party issue.
But it is an issue, to your point, that is becoming a bigger thing on the right, where it traditionally has not been an issue. And, you know, even if not anti-Semitism, more questions about Israel even, right, that maybe weren't being asked before. And so because of that, I think that you're looking for ways to unite the party. You know, you've also got Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene going at it publicly. So there's a lot of spatting going on within the party. So I think that, look, when you're the president, whatever party you're in, you're the head not only of the country, but of that party. And so he's probably got to start thinking about how he's going to unite people around common goals and common causes rather than having public disputes like this.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as we kind of round out the conversation, let's zoom out a little bit and remember that as Christians, we value transparency for the purpose of accountability and restoration. Ultimately, that's what we want to see through the gospel, of course. And what encourages me is to know that in the end, whoever was involved in the sins that occurred in Epstein's orbit, there's going to be a perfect justice. And I'm reminded, Billy, of Romans 12:19, where Paul wrote, "Dear friends, never take revenge. Leave that to the righteous anger of God, for the scriptures say, I will take revenge, I will pay them back, says the Lord." So, big picture, Billy, what are your final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think we get very consumed. And Ephesians 6 tells us we're not in a battle between us and them, between people, flesh and blood. We're in a spiritual battle. I think we get very consumed with trying to take matters into our own hands. And the reality is we need to turn to God and let him take care of these things. That doesn't mean we don't take action. I think we take action for restoration, like you said. But I think when it comes to the ultimate form of justice, that's going to come from God. And so we just got to remember that regardless of what happens in the earthly realm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll keep an eye on this issue. It'll be interesting to see if this is something the Republicans take up in Congress as it pertains to the Epstein files. But of course, like I said, we'll continue to keep an eye on it. Billy, thanks for being here to break it down.
Thank you.